My name is Amber. Until 3 months ago, that name felt like it belonged to someone else. Or rather, to a version of me that was simple, uncomplicated. Amber was a daughter who loved her mother without question. Amber was a 24-year-old graphic designer who found joy in clean lines and balanced color palettes, who paid her rent on time, and who believed with a gentle and unwavering certainty in the fundamental goodness of her small world. That world consisted almost entirely of two people, my grandmother, Eleanor, and my mother, Sarah. Now, with one gone and the other a stranger wearing her face, I am learning what my name truly means, what weight it can carry. It began, as most life-altering events do, not with a bang, but with the dry rustle of an envelope. My grandmother had passed away 6 weeks prior. The grief was a thick, sound-dampening fog that had settled over my life. Grandma Eleanor was my anchor, my confidant, the keeper of my childhood secrets. She was the scent of lavender and old books, the quiet wisdom in a world that was often too loud. My mother and I had mourned together, or so I thought. We held each other during the funeral, our tears mingling. She had been a pillar of strength, handling the arrangements with a stoic grace that I admired. "We'll get through this, sweetie," she'd murmured, stroking my hair as I sobbed into her shoulder. "We have each other." Those words were a lifeline in the turbulent sea of my sorrow. I clung to them, believing them to be as true and solid as the ground beneath my feet. The envelope was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Crawley, Finch and Associates. It was thick, creamy, and addressed solely to me, Amber Joshi. My mother had brought the mail in, placing the stack on the small kitchen table of our shared apartment. She had lingered for a moment, her eyes fixed on the embossed return address. "Looks important," she had said, her voice light, almost too light. "Probably just junk mail trying to look official," I'd replied, distracted by a design brief on my laptop. "Maybe," she'd said, turning away to busy herself at the sink. "You should open it, though." Later that evening, after my mother had gone. To bed, I finally slit the envelope open. The fog of grief was so dense that my brain was slow to process the legal jargon. Last will and testament of Eleanor Vance Joshi, executor of the estate, beneficiary. The words swam before my eyes until they coalesced into a single, staggering reality. Grandma Eleanor, my quiet, frugal grandmother who wore cardigans with patched elbows and reused tea bags, had left me everything. It wasn't a small, sentimental sum. It was an inheritance of such magnitude that I had to read the document 3 times to believe it wasn't a cruel, elaborate mistake. There was her house, a charming 2-story Victorian in the city's old quarter, a property I knew she had owned outright but had never considered in terms of its market value. A stock portfolio, managed prudently for decades, had blossomed into a figure with so many zeros I felt dizzy. And then there was the personal effects, which included a collection of antique jewelry I had only ever seen in faded photographs. My first emotion was not joy, but a profound and crushing sense of responsibility. It felt like a weight, a burden, of trust I was not equipped to carry. Tucked inside the main document was a smaller, hand-sealed envelope with "For my Amber" written in my grandmother's familiar, elegant script. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was not about money, it was about life. "My dearest Amber," it began. "If you are reading this, then my time of watching sunsets has come to an end. Do not mourn too long, my love. Think of me instead. When you see a particularly beautiful shade of blue in the sky, I want to tell you why I have made this decision, a decision which may seem unorthodox to some. Your mother, my Sarah, is a woman I love with all my heart, but she sees the world through a lens of want. She has always been searching for something to make her feel whole, a bigger house, a nicer car, a life different from the one she has. It is a hunger that I fear can never be satisfied. I have provided for her sufficiently throughout her life, and she will be taken care of. But this legacy is not for quenching a thirst. It is for building a foundation. You, my Amber, you see the world through a lens of being. You find joy in creation, in stability, in love. You do not seek to acquire, but to build. This inheritance is not a prize to be won. It is a set of tools. It is the freedom to say no to a job you hate. It is the security to walk away from a situation that compromises your soul. It is the chance to build a life on your own terms, beholden to no one. Use these tools wisely. Protect them. Protect your future. Know that my greatest joy was watching you grow into the remarkable woman you are. My love for you is the one investment that has yielded infinite returns. Your loving grandma, Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the crisp paper. It was as if she were in the room with me, her calm voice cutting through the legal fog and giving me clarity. The inheritance was not just money, it was her. Final act of love, her ultimate gift of protection. I felt a fierce, burning loyalty to her wishes, a resolve solidifying in my chest. I folded the letter, placed it back in its envelope, and hid it in the one place I knew no one would ever look. Inside the dust jacket of a dense textbook on typography from my college days. When I told my mother the next morning, I did so with a sense of trepidation I couldn't quite name. I focused on the house. "Grandma left me the house, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her reaction was, at first, everything I could have hoped for. Her eyes widened and a brilliant smile spread across her face. She rushed to me, pulling me into a tight hug. "Oh, Amber, that's wonderful! Her beautiful house. I have so many memories there. We can finally move out of this cramped apartment. We can get new furniture. I've always wanted a proper dining set, one where we can host holidays." She was using the word we. In that moment, I didn't have the heart to correct her. I let her talk, her words tumbling out in an excited rush. Plans for renovations, for gardening, for a future that she was painting in vivid, optimistic colors. I saw the sparkle in her eyes, the genuine joy. And I told myself that Grandma's letter was perhaps overly cautious. Maybe my mother had changed. Maybe this would be good for us. The first few weeks were a blur of this shared excitement. We visited the house together. My mother walked through the rooms, her hands trailing along dusty furniture, her mind miles away, redesigning and redecorating. I was more subdued, feeling my grandmother's presence in every creak of the floorboards, every sliver of light that pierced the grimy windows. For my mother, the house was a blank canvas. For me, it was a sacred space, filled with memories I was terrified of erasing. The rest of the inheritance came to light gradually. I didn't want to overwhelm her, so I mentioned the portfolio in passing, downplaying its value. "There's some savings too. It will help with the property taxes and upkeep on the house," I said vaguely. This was when the shift began. It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow, creeping alteration in the atmosphere between us, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The we started to sound different. It was less of a shared dream and more of an assumption of ownership. The comments started subtly. While we were grocery shopping, she would hold up a premium brand of olive oil. "We can afford the good stuff now," she'd say with a wink. The we was her spending my money. A week later, she came home with brochures for luxury cruises. "Don't you think we deserve a real vacation, Amber? After everything we've been through? A mother-daughter trip to the Mediterranean. We could go first class." I would offer a non-committal smile, a vague, maybe someday, and change the subject. But the ideas only grew more grandiose. She started talking about selling the house. "It's a lovely old place, but think of the upkeep, sweetie. It's a money pit. If we sell it, we could buy a modern condo downtown with a pool and a gym, and we'd still have plenty left over." "I don't want to sell it," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "It was Grandma's." "Don't be sentimental," she chided gently, but her eyes held a flicker of something hard. Eleanor was practical. She'd want us to make a smart investment, not hang on to a dusty old relic. She had started calling my grandmother Eleanor. Not Mom, not Grandma. It was a small thing, but it felt like a deliberate distancing, a way of turning her own mother into a financial benefactor rather than a beloved family member. The pressure intensified, coiling around me like a boa constrictor. The loving, supportive mother I knew was being replaced by a calculating stranger. She began to weave her sacrifices into every conversation. "I remember when you wanted those expensive art classes," she'd say over dinner. "I worked double shifts for 6 months to pay for them. I never regretted it, of course. I'd do anything for you." The unspoken conclusion hung in the air. "And now, it's your turn to do something for me." She started having hushed phone calls. turning away from me when I entered the room. Once, I overheard a snippet. No, I haven't asked her directly yet. I'm working on it. Just be patient. Who was she talking to? What was she working on? A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. The dream of us was dying, replaced by a terrifying new dynamic of me versus her. I started spending more time at the old house by myself, seeking refuge within its quiet, dusty walls. I'd sit in my grandmother's favorite armchair, her letter clutched in my hand, its words a shield against the mounting confusion. It is a set of tools. A chance to build a life on your own terms, beholden to no one. My grandmother had seen this coming. She had known her daughter, my mother, better than I did. The realization was a fresh wave of grief, a betrayal that felt deeper than the first. I wasn't just mourning my grandmother, I was mourning the mother I thought I had. The direct demand, when it finally came, was almost a relief. The tension had become unbearable, a silent, screaming match in our tiny apartment. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was sketching in my notebook, and she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, methodically clipping coupons, an activity so mundane it was jarring. She cleared her throat. "Amber," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about the inheritance." I put my pencil down, my heart starting to pound. "Okay. I've been thinking a lot, and I've spoken to a financial advisor. This was news to me. It makes no sense for a young woman like you to be managing such a large sum of money. You don't have the experience. It's a huge burden, a huge risk. You could lose it all with one bad decision." She paused, her eyes meeting mine, full of practiced sincerity. "I want you to transfer the estate into my name." The words hung in the air, stark and ugly. It wasn't a request. It was a directive. "I will manage it for us," she continued, her voice softening, becoming persuasive. "I'll put the house in both our names, of course. But the liquid assets, the portfolio, it needs a mature, experienced hand. I can invest it properly, grow it for our future. Your future. Think of it as my job to protect you, just like I've always done." My mind was reeling. The audacity of it. The carefully constructed argument designed to make me feel young, incapable, and foolish. She was using my love and trust as leverage, framing her greed as maternal concern. I thought of my grandmother's letter. She sees the world through a lens of want. "What about Grandma's will?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "She left it to me." "Her letter," she explained why. My mother waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Amber, your grandmother was old. She was sentimental. She didn't understand the complexities of the modern financial world. She loved you, and she wanted to give you a gift, I know that. But this is too much for you to handle. It's a responsibility, not a gift, and it's one I need to take off your shoulders." Every word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to undermine my confidence, to invalidate my grandmother's final wish. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger, her eyes glittering with a desperate, rapacious hunger that chilled me to the bone. The warmth, the love, the shared laughter of our past felt like a grand illusion, a long-running play where I was the only one who didn't know it was a work of fiction. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thin and sharp in my lungs. I pictured my grandmother's face, her kind eyes, her steady smile. I held on to her words as if they were a physical shield. "Protect them. Protect your future." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent kitchen with the force of a physical blow. My mother's carefully constructed mask of concern did not just crack, it shattered. Her face, which had been arranged in soft, loving lines, hardened into something unrecognizable. Her lips thinned into a white, bloodless line. Her eyes, which had been pleading and gentle, turned to chips of ice. "What did you say?" she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "No, Mom," I repeated, a little stronger this time, my own resolve surprising me. "I can't do that. The inheritance stays in my name. I'm going to honor Grandma's wishes. It's what she wanted," For a long moment, she just stared at me, a look of pure, unadulterated fury contorting her features. The silence was terrifying, a vacuum in which all our years of love and affection were being sucked away, leaving nothing behind. The air crackled with her rage. I could feel it radiating from her, a palpable toxic heat. When she finally spoke, her voice was completely devoid of warmth, a weapon honed to a razor's edge. "I see," she said slowly, nodding her head as if confirming a long-held dark suspicion. "So that's how it is. My own daughter. Ungrateful." She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She did something far worse. She looked at me with an expression of cold, clinical detachment, as if I were a stranger who had just committed an unforgivable offense against her. "This isn't over, Amber," she said, her voice flat and menacing. "You may think this is your decision to make, but this is a family matter. We are going to have a family meeting, and we are going to discuss your selfish, foolish choice." She turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word, her back rigid. I was left alone at the table, my hands trembling, my teacup cold. The fog of grief had finally lifted, only to be replaced by the terrifying, crystal-clear certainty that I had just declared war on my own mother, and a battle was coming for which I was entirely unprepared. The 2 days that followed my refusal were not filled with shouting or arguments. They were filled with a silence so profound and heavy, it felt like a physical presence in our small apartment. It was a silence that had texture and weight, that absorbed sound and light. It was a weapon, and my mother wielded it with the skill of a master executioner. Her name, Sarah, which I had always associated with warmth and laughter, now tasted like ash in my mouth. She moved through our shared space like a ghost, her presence a constant, chilling accusation. She would not look at me. If I entered a room, she would find a reason to leave, her movements stiff with a control that was more terrifying than any outburst of rage. She didn't slam doors, she closed them with a soft, deliberate click that echoed the finality of a closing. Coffin lid. She didn't ignore my questions, she would simply pause, a long, drawn-out moment of quiet, before giving a one-word answer, her voice flat and toneless. "Good morning, Mom," I'd say, my voice unnaturally bright in the oppressive quiet. A beat of silence. Then, "Morning," delivered to the far wall. The air between us grew thick with unspoken words, with the ghosts of 1,000 shared memories now twisted into instruments of torment. The love I had felt for her my entire life was being systematically starved, and I could feel it withering inside me. This was not the mother I knew. The mother I knew was vibrant, expressive, sometimes overly dramatic, but always, always present. This new version was a hollowed-out shell, a walking embodiment of disappointment. Her martyrdom was a performance piece enacted in 3 acts throughout the day. In the morning, it was the heavy sigh as she poured herself coffee, a sound that spoke of burdens too heavy to bear. In the afternoon, it was the way she would sit by the window staring out at nothing, a single perfect tear sometimes tracing a path down her cheek, only to be quickly, theatrically wiped away if she sensed I was watching. In the evening, it was her refusal to eat the dinner I cooked, instead making herself a single piece of toast, a public display of an appetite destroyed by sorrow, a sorrow her every action screamed that I had caused. I felt like I was losing my mind. The silence was a constant hum of guilt beneath the surface of my thoughts. Had I been too harsh? Was I being ungrateful? I would pull out my grandmother's letter, my hands shaking, and read her words again and again. She sees the world through a lens of want. Protect your future. The ink on the page was a tangible link to sanity, a reminder that I was not imagining things, that my grandmother had foreseen this, had tried to arm me against it. But in the face of my mother's suffocating silence, even Eleanor's wisdom felt fragile. Then the web began to expand. I knew it was happening when I came home from work and heard the hushed, urgent tones of my mother's voice coming from her bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but her words snagged, my attention like thorns. "Don't know what to do, Carol," she was saying, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. She's not thinking clearly. This money, it's changing her. She's talking about selling the house, getting rid of all of Eleanor's things. It's like she wants to erase her grandmother's memory. A cold shock washed over me. It was a lie, a complete bald-faced fabrication. I was the one who wanted to keep the house, to preserve the memories. She was the one who had called it a dusty old relic. She was twisting reality, recasting me as the villain in a drama of her own invention. The person on the other end of the line was my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, a woman whose entire personality was built on a foundation of high-strung emotion and a desperate need to be involved in family drama. She was the perfect first recruit for my mother's army. The call ended just as I was about to storm in and confront her. But what would I say? I heard you lying about me? She would deny it, twist it, and somehow make me the villain for eavesdropping. I retreated to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt a profound sense of violation, of being rewritten by the person who was supposed to know me best. The next day, the first volley from the outside world arrived. My phone buzzed. It was Aunt Carol. I hesitated before answering, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Amber, honey?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, oozing with a concern that felt utterly false. "Your mother called me. I am so worried about her. And about you, of course." "I'm fine, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice tight. "Are you, though, sweetie? Your mom says you're under a lot of stress. This inheritance, it's a huge burden. Your poor mother, she's beside herself with worry. She's barely sleeping. She only wants to help you, to protect you. You know that, right? She has always put you first." Every word was a perfectly calibrated dose of guilt. She painted a picture of my mother as a fragile, selfless saint, and me as a cold, unfeeling daughter causing her untold pain. I tried to defend myself, to explain that I was trying to honor my grandmother's wishes. But my words were twisted before they had even fully left my mouth. "Oh, honey, don't talk about it like that," she'd cut in. "Eleanor wouldn't want you to be fighting with your mother. Family is the most important thing. Sometimes we have to make compromises for the people we love. Don't you think you could compromise a little for your poor mother?" The 30-minute conversation felt like an interrogation designed to break me down. By the time I hung up, I felt emotionally bruised and utterly exhausted. The web was drawing tighter. Aunt Carol was now a thread, pulling on me, adding her weight to my mother's. 2 days later, the next thread was woven in. This time it was my Uncle Mark, Carol's husband. His approach was different, less emotional, more insidiously practical. He was a man who prided himself on his business sense, who saw life as a series of transactions. "Amber," he began, his voice exuding a faux fatherly authority. "Sarah and Carol have been talking to me, and I'll be honest, I'm concerned. Let's talk brass tacks here. You're a talented kid, great with the art stuff. But finance, that's a different league. We're talking about a significant portfolio here. Do you even know what an expense ratio is? A P/E ratio?" He fired off questions, not waiting for answers, his tone designed to make me feel small, ignorant, and hopelessly out of my depth. "Look, your mother's proposal makes sense," he continued, as if closing a business deal. "Let her manage the assets. She has life experience. You can focus on your career, on your art. It's a win-win. Don't let sentimentality cloud a good business decision. Your grandmother built that nest egg through smart choices, and the smartest choice you can make right now is to put it in the hands of someone more experienced." He called my inheritance a nest egg. He reduced my grandmother's legacy, her final act of love and trust, to a line on a spreadsheet. He, like my mother, had completely erased the emotional and personal significance of her gift, reframing it as a mere commodity. The conversation left me feeling not just guilty, but incompetent, a foolish child playing with grown-up toys. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was the enemy's headquarters. The silence was punctuated now by the ringing of my mother's phone. I would hear her murmuring, her voice conspiratorial, and I knew she was weaving her narrative thread by painful thread to cousins, to old family friends, to anyone who would listen. My phone became a source of anxiety. Every buzz made my stomach clench. It was a cousin calling to say she'd heard I was having a hard time and that I should listen to my mother. It was a text from an old family friend, a woman who used to babysit me, saying, "Your mom has sacrificed so much for you. I hope you're being good to her." I was being painted as unstable, selfish, and cruel. My mother, in her version of the story, was the long-suffering matriarch, fighting to save her foolish daughter from herself. She began to escalate her performance at home. She would accidentally leave a pharmacy bill for high blood pressure medication on the kitchen counter. She would forget her wallet and have to call Uncle Mark to borrow money for groceries, ensuring I overheard the conversation, all of it designed to construct a narrative of a woman on the verge of collapse, financially and physically, because of her daughter's heartlessness. The most corrosive part of the entire campaign was the way it made me doubt my own reality. Was I the one who was wrong? Was I misinterpreting everything? I found myself rereading my grandmother's letter with a desperate, frantic energy. The words, "She has always been searching for something to make her feel whole. A hunger that I fear can never be satisfied," became my mantra, the one solid thing in a world that was tilting on its axis. But the constant barrage of external validation for my mother's narrative was a powerful force. A whole chorus of voices I had known and trusted my entire life was telling me I was wrong. It was gaslighting on a familial scale, a systematic effort to dismantle my perception of the truth. My work began to suffer. I couldn't focus on design briefs. The clean lines and balanced palettes I had once loved now seemed frivolous. How could I worry about kerning and color theory when my entire world was imploding? I would sit at my desk, staring at a blank screen, the voices of my relatives echoing in my head. Your poor mother, a different league, selfish, ungrateful. The manipulation began to target not just my decision, but me. My mother would make small, cutting remarks, designed to chip away at my self-esteem. She'd glance at a design I was working on and say, "Is that really a stable career, though? It seems so flighty." Or if I mentioned going out with friends, she'd sigh and say, "It must be nice to have so much freedom, not a care in the world." Each comment was a small poisoned dart, reminding me that in her eyes, I was irresponsible, frivolous, and incapable of understanding the seriousness of the real world. I started to feel a creeping paranoia. When I walked into a room, the conversation would stop. When I passed my mother on the phone, she would lower her voice to an indecipherable whisper. The apartment felt like it was closing in on me, the walls lined with the ears of her allies. I felt watched, judged, and condemned in my own home. My sleep was plagued by anxiety dreams where I was on trial, with my entire family staring at me from the jury box, my mother on the witness stand, weeping. The announcement of the family meeting was the culmination of this 2-week campaign of psychological warfare. It was not delivered as an invitation. It was a summons. My mother approached me one evening, her face a mask of grave, reluctant duty. She was no longer silent. She was now the spokesperson for a higher authority. The family. "Amber," she said, her voice heavy with feigned sorrow. "I've been speaking with everyone. Carol, Mark, your cousins. Everyone is very concerned about you." She paused, letting the weight of the collective everyone settle on me. "We all feel that this situation has gotten out of hand. Your refusal to listen to reason, your disrespect for my experience, it's hurting the whole family. So, we've decided that we need to have a proper family meeting." The term family meeting was a euphemism. It was clear from her tone that this was not to be a discussion among equals. It was to be an intervention, a tribunal. "It will be at Carol and Mark's house on Sunday," she continued, not asking if I was available, but informing me of my required presence. "We need to talk this through. As a family, we all just want what's best for you, and we need to help you see that. We need to help you make the right choice." Help me make the right choice. The words were a threat wrapped in the language of love. The choice had already been made for me. My role was simply to capitulate. She had spent 2 weeks building her case, recruiting her jury, and poisoning the... Well, now she was ready to put me on the stand. In the days leading up to Sunday, a grim resignation settled over me. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it crystallized into a hard, cold knot of resolve. The web was complete. Every thread, my mother's silence, Aunt Carol's wheedling, Uncle Mark's condescension, The whispers, the lies, the carefully orchestrated performances of victimhood, all pulled tight, leading to one single point: the living room of my aunt's house. I was walking into an ambush. There would be no discussion, only pressure. No understanding, only judgment. I felt profoundly, terrifyingly alone. But as I thought of my grandmother, of the strength it must have taken for her to write that letter, knowing the fallout it would cause, I knew that being alone was not the same as being wrong. The web had been spun to trap and paralyze me. I didn't know if I could break free, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I could not, would not, let it consume me. The drive to my Aunt Carol's house was a journey through a fog of dread. The world outside my car windows seemed muted, the colors of a Sunday afternoon bleached out by my own internal turmoil. Every stoplight felt like a temporary stay of execution, a few precious seconds to breathe before continuing the slow march toward my own ambush. I clutched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, the smooth plastic a poor substitute for the anchor I so desperately needed. My grandmother's letter was not with me. It was too precious to bring into enemy territory, but I had read it so many times that its words were etched onto the inside of my eyelids. It is the freedom to say no to a situation that compromises your soul. I repeated the line to myself, a mantra against the rising tide of panic. Today, I knew with a bone-deep certainty my soul would be put to the test. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark lived in a sprawling, modern house in a newer suburb, the kind of place with a 2-story entryway and a lawn so meticulously manicured it looked like a green carpet. It was a house designed to project success and cheerful domesticity. In the past, I had associated it with the smell of roasting turkey during holidays and the chaotic laughter of my younger cousins. Today, as I pulled into the driveway behind a line of familiar cars, it looked like a fortress. The large windows, which should have been welcoming, seemed like vacant eyes, watching my approach with cold indifference. The house wasn't a home. Today, it was a venue, a courtroom. I sat in the car for a full minute after turning off the engine, trying to build a wall around my heart. I pictured my grandmother's face, her smile lines, the calm, steady light in her eyes. "Protect your future, Amber." It was her last command. I had to honor it. Taking a ragged breath, I got out of the car. The air was still and warm, but a chill traced its way down my spine. Before my finger even touched the doorbell, the door was pulled open. Aunt Carol stood there, her face a carefully constructed mask of pained sympathy. She wore soft colors, beige and cream, an outfit chosen to make her appear gentle and non-threatening. Her arms enveloped me in a hug that felt less like an embrace and more like a capture. "Oh, Amber, honey," she breathed into my ear, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm so glad you came. We're all so worried. We're going to fix this, you'll see." She was already framing it as something broken within me that the collective we, needed to fix. I stiffened in her arms, offering no response. She pulled back, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, and patted my arm before ushering me inside. Uncle Mark was standing in the foyer, arms crossed over his chest, a posture of stern, paternal authority. He didn't smile. He just gave me a short, sharp nod. "Amber," he said, his tone that of a principal addressing a troublesome student. "Glad you could make it. We're in the living room." He turned and led the way. The living room was just off the foyer, and as I stepped through the archway, the low hum of conversation abruptly ceased. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The silence that fell was heavy and immediate, thick with expectation. And in that silence, I saw the full scale of the ambush they had prepared. It wasn't just my mother, Carol, and Mark. They had assembled a comprehensive jury. My cousins, Jenna and Tom, were sitting on a love seat, their faces carefully blank. Jenna, who had been my closest confidant through our teenage years, refused to meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on a point on the floor somewhere, to my left. Across the room were my great-aunt Millie, my mother's cousins from out of state, and even the Donahues, old family friends who had known me since I was a baby. They were all here. Every single person my mother could rally to her cause was present, their faces a gallery of disappointment, concern, and outright hostility. They had been primed. They had been fed her story, her carefully crafted narrative of a daughter gone astray, and the seating. It was a masterpiece of psychological stagecraft. A large, plush sofa and several armchairs had been arranged in a semicircle, creating an enclosed space. My mother sat in the very center, on an ottoman that functioned as a throne, with Aunt Carol perched beside her like a loyal lady-in-waiting. The rest of the family filled the surrounding seats. And in the middle of the semicircle, facing them all, was a single hard-backed dining chair. It was stark, isolated, and obviously placed there for me. It was the witness stand, the hot seat. I felt a dizzying sense of derealization, as if I were watching a play about my own life. With numb feet, I walked to the designated chair and sat down. My back was ramrod straight. I placed my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking and looked out at the faces of my family, my tribe, who had now become my inquisitors. The silence stretched for a full minute. Then, my mother took a shaky breath, drawing all attention to herself. This was her stage. The performance was about to begin. She started not with anger, but with a sorrow so profound it seemed to suck the very air from the room. Her eyes were already glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice soft and trembling. She wasn't looking at me, but at the sympathetic faces surrounding her. I never thought I would have to do this, to air our family's pain like this, but I am at my wit's end. I am so terribly worried about my daughter. She paused, dabbing the corner of her eye with a tissue that seemed to have appeared in her hand from nowhere. "My mother, Eleanor," she continued, her voice catching. "She was my rock, my best friend. We all loved her so much, and I know she loved Amber more than anything. But she was from a different time, a simpler time. She didn't understand the pressures of the world today, the complexities. She was already laying the groundwork, invalidating my grandmother's wishes by painting her as a naive, sentimental old woman. She left Amber a gift, a beautiful, generous gift. But it has become a curse. It is a weight too heavy for her young shoulders to bear. It is changing her." Here, she finally turned her gaze to me, her eyes filled with a heartbreakingly perfect imitation of maternal anguish. "Oh, Amber, I see what it's doing to you. The stress, the confusion. It's making you turn away from the people who love you. It's making you hard." The word hard landed like a slap. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "I have tried to talk to her," my mother went on, her voice cracking. "I have offered to help her, to guide her, to take this terrible burden from her. All I want is to protect her, just as I have my entire life. I remember when she was a little girl, so full of dreams. I worked 2 jobs so she could have art lessons, so she could have everything I never had. I gave up my own dreams, my own opportunities, so that she could have hers. I have never asked for anything in return, nothing, except her trust." The performance was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. She was weaving a tapestry of sacrifice and selfless love, positioning herself as the ultimate martyr. "And now she wants to dishonor her grandmother's memory," she said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "She talks of selling the house, Eleanor's beautiful home, a place filled with our memories. She wants to sell it off for cash as if it means nothing. She wants to take this legacy, this foundation for our family's future, and squander it on I don't even know what. She won't tell me. She has shut me out completely." The lie was so blatant, so utterly the reverse of the truth, that I felt a surge of hot, incredulous anger. I opened my mouth to protest, to say, "That's not true. You're the one who wants to sell it." But before I could form the words, Aunt Carol placed a comforting hand on my mother's shoulder. "Shh, Sarah, it's all right," she cooed, before turning, her venomous gaze on me. "Amber, how can you do this to her?" she demanded, her voice rising with theatrical indignation. "Can't you see what you're putting her through? She has high blood pressure. The doctor told her she needs to avoid stress. Do you want to be responsible for making your own mother sick?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. I was no longer just ungrateful. I was a health risk. I was a potential murderer. Then Uncle Mark stood up, assuming the role of the voice of cold, hard reason. He began to pace in front of Me, like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "Let's put the emotion aside for a moment and talk facts," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Amber, you're a good kid. You make pretty pictures on a computer. But we are talking about a multi-asset portfolio with complex tax implications. We're talking about market volatility, estate planning, capital gains. These are not words from a board game. This is the real world, a world you, with all due respect, know nothing about." He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "Your mother is proposing a sensible, logical solution. She is proposing that we put these assets into a trust, to be managed by people with life experience and financial acumen, namely, her and me. This protects the principal. It ensures long-term growth. It provides for your future and for Sarah's. It is the only responsible course of action. Your refusal to even consider this is frankly baffling. It smacks of a childish rebellion, stubbornness that is going to have disastrous consequences." He was systematically dismantling any notion that I could be competent, painting me as a foolish child who needed to be saved from her own stupidity. The anger in my chest was now mixing with a terrifying sense of helplessness. Then came the blow that hurt the most. Jenna, my cousin, my friend, cleared her throat. All eyes turned to her. "Amber," she said softly, her voice full of a pity that felt worse than anger. I just don't get it. We all have to grow up sometime. We all have responsibilities. And your first responsibility is to your mom. She's your mother. After everything she's done for you, to see you treat her like this, it's just really disappointing." Disappointing. The word coming from her was a knife in my gut. I looked at her, pleading with my eyes for her to remember the years of secrets we had shared, the times we had defended each other against the world. But the person looking back at me was a stranger, her eyes reflecting the collective judgment of the room. My mother's poison had infected her too. I finally found my voice, though it came out as a strangled croak. "You don't understand," I whispered, my words directed at Jenna but intended for them all. "Grandma, she left me a letter." My mother gasped, a sharp, theatrical sound. "How dare you?" she hissed, her sorrow momentarily replaced by a flash of pure fury. "How dare you hide behind the words of my dead mother? She was old. She was not in her right mind. You are twisting her love into an excuse for your own greed." "That's not true," I cried, my voice finally breaking free. "She wrote it all down. She said she wanted me to have it, to build my own life. She knew you would." "Enough!" Uncle Mark's voice boomed through the room, cutting me off. "We will not have you disrespecting Eleanor's memory or your mother's grief like this. This is not about some sentimental letter. This is about financial reality. It's about tearing this family apart," Aunt Carol wailed, perfectly on cue. Chorus of voices joined in. "She's right, Amber. This is unbecoming," said Mrs. Donahue, shaking her head sadly. "In my day, we respected our mothers," Great Aunt Millie added, her voice thin and reedy. "Just listen to them, Amber," another cousin pleaded. "They're just trying to help you." It was a tidal wave of condemnation. Every attempt I made to speak was immediately shouted down, reinterpreted, or dismissed. My words were meaningless here. The truth was meaningless here. They had their story, and they were sticking to it. I felt my anger begin to curdle into despair. They were going to break me. I could feel my resolve cracking. The wall I had tried to build crumbling brick by brick under the relentless assault. I was one person against a room full of righteous certainty. I slumped in the chair, defeated. The fight went out of me. The room fell silent again, sensing my surrender. Uncle Mark stepped forward, his expression softening into one of magnanimous victory. He was holding a sleek leather folder. "All right," he said, his voice calm and reasonable now that the battle was won. "This doesn't have to be difficult. I've had my lawyer draw up the necessary paperwork. It's all very standard." He opened the folder on the coffee table in front of me. Inside were several documents filled with dense legal text and flagged with little yellow "Sign Here" stickers. "This one," he explained, tapping the first document, "is a limited power of attorney, granting your mother and me joint authority over the estate's financial matters. This one sets up the family trust. It's all designed to protect the assets and provide you with a generous monthly allowance. A safety net. We'll handle the sale of the house, invest the capital, We'll take care of everything. All you have to do is sign." My mother moved to my side, kneeling down beside my chair. She took my hand in hers. Her skin was cool. She produced a pen, a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen, and tried to press it into my palm. "It's for the best, my love," she whispered, her voice once again dripping with honeyed affection. "Let us take this burden from you. Just sign and it can all be over. We can be a family again." This was it, the final moment, the checkmate. The room held its breath. All eyes were on me, on the pen, on the documents. I looked down at the black ink, the yellow flags, the neat lines waiting for my signature, a signature that would sign away not just my inheritance, but my future, my independence, my soul. I looked at my mother's face, so close to mine, her eyes wide with desperate, triumphant expectation. I looked at Uncle Mark, standing over me, a smug, satisfied look on his face. I looked around the room at the jury of my family, their expressions a mixture of pity and impatience. They had won. I was beaten. And then something shifted. It was a tiny, imperceptible click deep inside me. As I stared at their faces, their masks of concern slipped, and for a fleeting second, I saw what lay beneath. Greed, desperation, and a terrifying, bottomless hunger. I saw the pack of wolves my grandmother had warned me about. Her words came back to me, no longer a desperate mantra, but a thunderclap of absolute clarity. This is the freedom to say no to a situation that compromises your soul. This, right here, this chair, this room, these people, this pen, this was the situation. This was the compromise. The despair and helplessness that had been drowning me didn't just recede. They were burned away by a sudden, white-hot surge of anger. It was a clean, pure anger. A righteous anger. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the lies. It was about the manipulation. It was about their attempt to break my spirit, to rewrite my reality, to devour my future before it had even begun. They weren't trying to save me. They were trying to consume me. My hand, which had been limp in my mother's grasp, slowly curled into a fist. My spine, which had been slumped into feet, straightened. I lifted my head, my gaze no longer pleading or lost. I looked from the documents on the table to the pen in my mother's hand, and then back to her expectant, smiling face. The trembling had stopped. The fear was gone. The victim was gone. And in her place, someone else was looking out through my eyes, someone they had not counted on, someone they did not know at all. My mother's face was a study in triumphant relief. Her smile was soft, her eyes shining with moisture, not of sorrow now, but of victory. She was stroking my hand, the one that lay limp in my lap, with her cool, smooth fingers. The heavy fountain pen she held felt like a dead weight against my knuckles. It was a beautiful object, gleaming in black, a tool of surrender. The documents on the coffee table were a testament to their thoroughness, a web of legal language designed to ensnare me, to strip me of my grandmother's final gift. The air in the room was thick with the cloying sweetness of feigned concern, a suffocating perfume of communal righteousness. Every person in that room, from my duplicitous uncle to my disappointing cousin, was waiting for the final, satisfying click of the pen's cap being removed, for the scratch of nib on paper that would signal my capitulation. I looked at the yellow "Sign Here" flag. It was a tiny, cheerful beacon pointing the way to my own erasure. It was the end of a path paved with 2 weeks of relentless psychological warfare, a campaign of silence, lies, and emotional blackmail that had been waged against me by my own mother. She had turned my family into her army, and this living room was the site of my unconditional surrender. They had beaten me. I could feel the last of my resolve crumbling into fine, useless dust. The weight of their collective will was a physical force, pressing down on my shoulders, bowing my head. And then, as my fingers twitched with the involuntary impulse to take the pen, to end the torment, a strange thing happened. A memory, unbidden, and crystal clear, surfaced from the deep well of my childhood. I was 7 years old, standing on the high dive at the community pool for the first time. My mother was on the ground, shouting encouragement. "You can do it, Amber, just be brave." But I was frozen, terrified of the height, of the fall, of the cold shock of the water. My grandmother Eleanor had quietly climbed the ladder behind me. She didn't shout. She didn't push. She simply stood beside me, her presence a calm, steadying warmth. She pointed not at the water below, but at the horizon. "Look out there," she had said, her voice a gentle murmur against the backdrop of the splashing and shouting. "Don't look down at what you're afraid of. Look at where you want to go." I had looked, and I had jumped.